back when I was clear-headed, and I'm even still battle with it at times now. But whenever I've made a lot of effort to try to humble myself, it seems that there are times that some men, whenever you humble yourself to somebody in authority over you, they seem to think they take it as a sign of weakness. Have you ever noticed?
Yeah, I had big problems with that, you know. Yeah. But, you know, yeah, when you're kind and you're humble, people tend to see that as weakness. But the thing is, you know, like it says, at some point God's going to intervene for you and lift you up. He's going to use you in a greater way than those who are prideful and like to dominate and control situations and other people. So, you know, there's a verse in Revelations where it says he opens doors that no man can close. If God has something for you, regardless of how other people are around you, if God has it for you, nobody's going to stop it. So it's just a matter of trusting God. So let me just go through what we have highlighted. On page 74 in the middle, we highlighted, we have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Then we highlighted, we circled the word, the rule. The rule is, we must. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. And jumping over to page 75, near the top we got highlighted, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. And you know, I talk to many, many people. And there's people even in this room where we go for walks. And it's not just to talk, to hear you talk, I talk. And I'll share things I go through. I don't elevate myself above other people because I see value in other people. You guys have great insight, great things in your mind and in your heart. It just has to come out. And many times I've went on walks and I've gotten nourished by hearing and listening to other people. So it's not just that I have to give it out. I can receive just as much information and inspiration from you. You know what inspired me greatly this week through one of you guys? Is David's story. I thought about it for days afterwards. The emotion that was put into the story. I wish it was on video. It was very good. I felt what he was feeling and the story he was sharing in tears. It really helped me out to listen to that. So I love to hear people's stories because when you hear what they've been through and how they escaped death or escaped different other heart-rending situations, then you have a glimmer of hope that I'd love to see great things happen. Look at all the bad things that's happened. And so you're inspired to see that the person's really wanting to get things right after all the pain and suffering that they went through. So like here where it says, when we decide who is to hear our story. That's one of the reasons why we have you share your story, so that you get more comfortable in sharing and talking to others. But I think maybe at some point what I'd like to do is, by consent, if you're willing to videotape your story, I'd love to be able to do that. Just to have, have it. That was a missed opportunity. I would have loved to have had David's story on video. That would have transformed a lot of people. Just by seeing the tears and hearing him crying and talking about his past and how he wanted to get his life together. You know, if someone's in that same situation, that can have a great positive effect on another person. I'd love to be able to do that by consent. So from time to time, I might ask, if you're about to share your story, do you mind if I record it? And some I could use, and some maybe not. You know, but I want to catch those moments that is very transformational, and could affect another person that may be on the verge of suicide or verge of hopelessness, and they hear your story. It could be the story of a lifetime that changes their life. So we saw that pride and self-centeredness is going to keep us down. And we got to put God first and seek him. Okay, on 75 it says, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. So the big question is, do you have perfect peace? In the Old Testament it says the wicked are like the troubled sea that cannot rest, and they have no peace. A person without God and they're unsaved, it says, I don't care if they have a smile on their face, or a new car in the garage, or whatever they got, if they're unsaved, they're miserable. And you ever wonder why so many people in Hollywood who have all this money are so, you can see it, they're so unhappy. They're so medicated. They're so medicated and on drugs. Elvis Presley, what happened to him? What happened to Michael Jackson? What happened to Prince? He just died from a drug overdose. Whitney Houston. I mean, you can go on and on and on. There must be a lot of misery when it comes to having popularity, because they sure do medicate and take drugs a lot. They can't be happy. They can't have peace. All that money didn't bring them happiness. You know, and you know, the more people have, Jesus said, a man's life does not consist by the abundance of things that he possesses. In other words, when you first get that thrill of something new, but at some point it gets old and boring. Who is the person who ended up being a female? Caitlyn was the new name.
Oh, man.
Who was that? Bruce Jenner. You know, very wealthy, had everything. But, you know, at some point you can only take so many vacation trips. And after a while, everything starts getting boring to you. There's nothing left to do. You already experienced a new car. You already experienced a new house. After a while, things get boring. And those things don't give you a thrill no more. And he was still lonely and hurting inside. There was something going on. The reason why he wanted to transform into a woman after all those years. He wanted to go back to a man?
He wants to be Bruce again.
Because probably initially he was probably thrilled, excited for the new experience. But now that he's experienced it, you know, once you experience something, then it's not as great as you thought. Then you're lonely and you're hurting again. This is how the Bible says. It says, they that will be rich will fall into a temptation and a snare. It doesn't say those who are rich. It says those who will be rich, who desire, they're discontented, they're unhappy, and they just want more. They want more and they want more. It says those who desire to be more and more rich will fall into a temptation and a snare, into many foolish hurts, and they'll be drowned in misery. But it says godliness with contentment is great gain. For we came into this world with nothing, and we're going to leave it with nothing. So having food and clothing, it says, be content. Our real value and our real identity is in knowing Christ and having a future in eternity. It says, if you love this world, then you don't love God. 1 John 2:15-17. If you love this world, then you don't love God. It says, if you hate your life in this world, you'll save it to life eternal. So I don't want to get too wrapped up.
Just remember, peace, peace.
I don't want to get too wrapped up in this world, because then you lose your focus on God if you get too wrapped up in this world. Keep your focus on eternity. That's where it's going to count. That's where your reward lies.
Hey, what was the second part of that statement? If you love this world, what was the other part?
It says, if you hate your life in this world, you'll save it to life eternal. That's what Jesus said. If you hate your life in this world, you know, this world's full of misery, pain, suffering, disappointment, hurts. I mean, you can go on and on. It's not very long. I don't care who you are, what you got. It's not very long before you are unhappy. I picked up a guy at a hospital on an ambulance when I worked the ambulance. Very wealthy. And I've been into some wealthy homes, transporting people from hospitals back to home. But this one, he was the lawyer for DuPont Chemical Company. Very wealthy chemical company up in Delaware. He was their lawyer, their top lawyer. But now he's old, and his life is over. And he's sickly and dying. And we took him home. Servants met us at the door. I was shocked. You know, like maids and servants met us at the door. And within 3 minutes, they were complaining to us. We had to take this guy up 3 flights of steps, big mansion. And it's hard to carry an adult man in a not a stretcher. We had one of those, I forget what you call it now. I've been out of that for gurney. Up to the 3rd floor, put him in bed. They didn't give us $1 for a tip. Nothing. The house was sweating hot. It was during the summertime. It was so hot in that house, I couldn't breathe. Within a few minutes, they all gathered around us downstairs. All the servants gathered around us, and they said that this guy is so into material things that he's unwilling to have air conditioning in his house. He don't want to waste the money, is what he told us. But yet he's dying, and he can't carry nothing with him. He'll leave it all behind.
There's no U-Hauls behind hers.
Nope. And I've seen that time and time again going into these big mansions. But there was this other row house. It was a row house. They didn't have much money. It was just a row house. And their father, twice we got a very good tip. They don't have to give us nothing, but sometimes people give you a tip. He was on 20 liters of oxygen. It was a very, very high amount, if I can recall. It wasn't a small amount. It was a high amount, where he had to be on a non-rebreather, not the little thing that goes in your nose, but the whole mask. And when we got to the house, the air supply company only had the little thing for in his nose. Well, he would have died. He needed more oxygen than what that could handle. And so we're in a real fix, because if we didn't figure out something soon, our tanks were going to run out in the ambulance. And we used all up our portables, and we had to figure out a way to tape stuff together and fix it to keep him alive until eventually we had to call another ambulance, or a fire truck, I think, came with additional oxygen. But the family was so grateful that they gave us a $20 tip for just staying there with him and helping him out. There was another guy that at the hospital, the nurse said, "Look, don't let this guy play you." This is what she said. Out in the hallway, she said, "Look, don't let this guy play you. He can walk. He can walk to this gurney." He can get in this stretcher from bed. Don't, because he just wants to be lazy. That's what the nurse told us. So we walked him out, hand by hand, we walked him out, put him on the stretcher, put him in the ambulance, took him home. Hand by hand, we walked him up 6 flights of concrete steps into the house, sat him in one of those plastic lawn chairs, and he had a heart attack on us. And he passed out. And so we're trying, this guy weighed like 250 pounds, pretty big guy. We tried to lift him up out of that, that he's stuck in that chair, and we're trying to lift him up out of there, and the family standing there just watching. And we're struggling, trying to get him down on the floor so we can, keep him alive. And they're just standing there complaining about us, like, what did they do? He has a heart attack, And we're struggling, trying to get him, it's embarrassing, Got him down on the floor, and we did save his life before, and he got up and started walking around. Yeah, he came out of that. But I noticed that there's a lot of selfish, self-centered, wealthy people who don't want to depart with their money. Just like when we're trying to get people to donate for our trips so we can take outings. There's some companies that could do it. It wouldn't hurt them at all to donate one trip, one outing, one event. But it's hard to find people to do that because they just don't want to let go of $1. They don't see the value in having their wealth and giving it to a blessing to other people. I like that verse in Proverbs where it says, "Give and it shall be given back to you. Pressed down and shaken together shall men give into your bosom." You can't outgive God. If you're generous in your giving of your time or your life in any way, if you're a giving person, if someone says, "Look, can you clean this toilet?" No, I'm not doing that. It's not my job. But if you go the second mile and you do things for other people, God promised that He will, it says, given it will be given back to you, whether it's your time, your energy, money, whatever it is, you give back to God. You do it for God. He'll give you back. It says, pressed down and shaken together shall men give into your bosom. In other words, God has a way to work on the minds and hearts of other individuals. And you wonder why we're so lean and nothing ever good happens in our life. Maybe it's because we're so selfish and self-centered. We're only thinking about ourselves. Because we are selfish people, right? That's what the A book says. We're selfish and self-centered. It says it's self-run crazy. That's why we drink and drug, because it's self-run array. But if we start thinking about other people more and start giving out more, God will see to it that someone notices that you're like that. It could be a guy that owns a great business and walks in this building and says, "I need a guy right now, and I'm going to give him $50,000 a year. Right now, if he's a good worker." Well, if you've been selfish and self-centered and you don't want to do nothing for anybody, you think we're going to say, "Hey, I got someone for you." No, we're not going to be thinking about you. We're going to think about the guy who really, when we need something, we know who to go to. If we need something done, we know who to ask. But then when the opportunity comes, we're going to mention that person's name.
When you say you basically get what you put out, is that what some people mistake as karma? I mean, all the good deeds that you do out, God repaying you through other little things?
Sometimes I think the statement's true that what goes around comes around. I think sometimes that is true. Because Galatians 6:7 says, whatever man sows, he's going to reap. So I think that God settles the score. It says, don't have vengeance on other people, but let God be the avenger. It says he'll recompense tribulation to those who trouble you. God, if someone causes you a bunch of grief and trouble, don't try to get back at them. Just let God deal with it. There was a guy who stole $5,000 from me. I can't get it back. It bothers me. That's a lot of money for me. I'm not a rich person. That's a lot of money for me. But he ripped me off. When I bought my house, he stole my money. He was a contractor. And he took me for $5,000. On top of that, I had to pay the $5,000 back in a loan. So I'm probably losing probably like $10,000 when it's all said and done.
Actually, that is true. When it's all said and done.
Yeah, renovation loan. He owned nothing. So, I mean, people say take him to court, but he owns nothing. He made sure he don't own nothing. Nothing's in his name. So, you know, I just left it go because I believe that it says he'll recompense tribulation to those who trouble you. I believe that God is sovereign and that he will exact measure to those who cause you a lot of harm and hurt. So some things you just got to learn to let it go. I've seen guys who say, I mean, they cry bloody murder because someone owes them $5. I lent him $5 2 weeks ago and he never paid me back. I'm going to murder that guy. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they just make a big issue about it. Well, why'd you lend the $5 in the first place if you don't have the attitude of, okay, if he gets it back, fine, but if he don't, I'm just going to let it in God's hands? Why be so vengeful over things like that? You know, if I feel I can lose it, I'll lend it out. But if I feel it's going to like ruin my whole week if I don't get it back, then I don't lend it in the first place. That's how I handle that kind of stuff.
The way I usually look at it is, if I loan you money, and especially in that small amount, it took me that much to find out what kind of man you are. That's all it is. If I loan you $5 and you're avoiding me now, it took me $5 to find out what kind of guy you really are.
Yeah.
It could have been a lot more.
Oh, goodbye, again.
Okay, let's look at a couple verses here. Proverbs 16:7. And then we're going to look at Isaiah 26:3 and then John 16:33.
When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord.
He will what?
When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord.
He will what?
He makes even his enemies live at peace with him.
Hush your mouth.
Okay, Isaiah 26:3.
You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. That's right.
That's a tough verse, especially when you're going through a major crisis in your life. And you're very upset and hurting. But, you know, keep your mind stayed on positive things. Keep your mind stayed on eternity. Colossians 3:1-3 says, set your affections on things above, not on things on the earth. So keep your mind heaven bound. Because if you focus on the misery on this earth, then you get all bent out of shape. Okay, John 16:33.
These things that I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcame the world.
You know, suicide is, people call it, in psychiatry, they call it a mental illness, but they are not quite understanding a lot of things because that's their atheistic approach toward life. They take an atheistic approach toward everything, and they see man as simply an animal. They don't see you as have any capacity spiritually. They're so off on a lot of things, but oftentimes, suicide is a desperate cry for an unmet need. It's a way of getting attention. A lot of times when people commit suicide, they don't intend to actually die, but they want to do it in such a way that they get attention. A cry for a desperate cry. They are desperate. A desperate cry for help. Oftentimes, it's a desperate cry for help because of an unmet need. They're unhappy. They're miserable. So, and then there's other things going on spiritually in their life. Sometimes people are suicidal because of a demonic possession. That's what the Bible teaches. Some people are suicidal because of demonic possession. Satan has control of their life. So it gives some examples of that in the Gospels. But when God saved their life and they were delivered, it says they were clothed and in their right mind. To be in your right mind is something to be treasured, because most people on planet Earth are not in their right mind. They drive to work, not in their right mind. They work, not in their right mind. They come home and they're not in their right mind. So to be in your right mind is something to be treasured. And you can only be in your right mind if you're saved. I don't care how brilliant, how together it looks like someone has in their life. If they're not saved, they're not in their right mind. How do I know that? That's what the Bible says. In 2 Corinthians 4, verse 3 and 4 says you're not in your right mind if you're not saved. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1 to 4, it says you're not in your right mind if you're unsaved. So regardless of your situation in life, if you're not saved, you're miserable. You're miserable and you don't even know it. Okay, going on, it says, our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Okay, Isaiah 55, verse 1 to 3. Just someone read that.
Incline your ear and come to me. Hear, and your soul shall live. And I will make an everlasting covenant with you. The sure mercies of David. Isaiah 53 verse 4, right?
55.
55 verse 4.
I was trying to figure out in my mind now, how can I explain that for a second? Okay, Isaiah 55, 1 to 3.
55, 1, 2, 3.
Come everyone who thirsts, come to the water, and he who has no money, come, buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk, without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for which is not bread, and your labor for which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. Incline your ears and come to me. Hear that your soul may live.
Okay, it says, a man receives nothing unless it's given to him from above. Every dollar we get, every piece of clothing we have, everything we got was given to us by God. And we got to be seeking God and put Him first. 1 John 1:9. Are you practicing that verse?
Amen.
That's a verse I practice just about every day. If I confess my sins, God's faithful and just to forgive me my sins and to cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Have you ever been frustrated with yourself over a failure, a disappointment, a wrong word, a hurt you caused someone else, a bad decision, lost money on a sinful practice or anything, and then you're angry with yourself? You're upset. You know, you spend $100, then you're upset thinking, wow, $100, I could have, let me see now, I could have went out to the movies, I could have went out to eat, I could have bought a pair of sneakers, what else could I have done with $100? And you think, man, I got to stop doing that. I got to stop spending my money on unprofitable things to try to satisfy my flesh. You know, have you ever given a girl money for sex? Have you ever spent money on drugs or alcohol? There was a guy who had a briefcase full of 100, he hit the lottery, and the briefcase was $150,000. He walked into a strip club, and they got, you know how they talk in there, they get to know people coming in there rather quick. And if you come walking in there with a briefcase, it won't be very long. And one of those girls will try to figure out what's in there, and then they pass the word around. We're going to set this guy up. And while his head was turned and one of the girls had him preoccupied, someone else stole the briefcase. And he called the police, but they said, "Did you see who took it?" No. And how about the girl that, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Nobody knew. Can you imagine he lost $150,000 because of his sexual desire?
Fool in his money.
That's happened. That's happened many times. That's happened many times. I had a professional boxer in our shelter one time. A professional boxer. It was, Kevin, do you remember what was his name?
Bert Cooper.
Yeah. He was in our shelter.
Yeah.
And he was wealthy at one time. And he used to get down on his knees. I used to watch him. When he got up in the morning, and he was a big guy. I never realized how big heavyweight boxers are until you're right next to him. They're pretty big guys. And every morning when he got up, I watched all the guys in the shelter. Every morning when he got up, as soon as he sat up, he got down on his knees at his bed. And he stayed there for a while. Every morning he did it. Every morning he was on his knees at his bed. And but, you know, a lot of times when people have wealth, what it does is it doesn't make your life better. It takes what your weakest spot is. Whatever your weakest spot is, and it amplifies it. That's what money does. Whatever your weakest spot is. If your weakest spot is women and you say, okay, if I get a lot of money, I'm going to do this, this, and this. No, if you get a lot of money, it's immediately going to go to your weakest spot. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, women, or some other kind of pursuit, it's going to make you worse. So if you're mild concerning women and wanting to run around with women, when you get money, you do it more. Whatever your weakest thing is, you do it more if you get money. So money's not going to, oftentimes, is a trigger to make things worse. And you've got to learn to manage and be careful with your weakest link. Don't focus on your strong points. A lot of times we ignore our weak parts and we just focus on the easy parts, which is our strong points. Focus on your weak link, because that's going to be the key to success or failure. If you ignore your weak spot and you don't try to figure out how to get some layers on that onion to protect that area, it's going to destroy your life. You'll end up in jail because of it. I ended up in jail one time because of a weak spot. And I had to learn through it. It was devastating to be handcuffed in front of people you know. Have you ever been handcuffed in front of relatives or a loved one or a wife, a girlfriend, or anybody that you know? Total embarrassment. It's total embarrassment. How about if they come to your job and handcuff you? Total embarrassment. Loss of your reputation. You see them all standing around talking about you before you even leave. You know, what's going on with John there? You know, what'd they come to get him for? And then you got to get bailed out. Then you go to prison. And then you get another embarrassing moment. You know what the embarrassing moment is? Bend over. Bend over. And then the security guards are back there laughing. Laughing at you, bending over, embarrassing you, talking about you, calling you names. Very embarrassing. And then you go and you sit in a jail cell, wondering when you can get out. I had when I was in jail, I heard about this guy who went on a Wednesday evening to a church parking lot and killed the people out in the parking lot. He had a .357 Magnum and he shot it, right? Then he left. He didn't get caught at that time. He left. And then I heard in the paper, I read it, I was reading all this in the paper. I read another article where it says that he cut off his fingers with his gun hand. I guess he felt remorse afterwards. Cut off his fingers. That's all it said, was that he cut off his fingers. I met that guy when I was in jail. This is what happened. They're leading me down this corridor. And they have these like, it's like a glass window, and then you have the jail cell, solitary confinement. But you can see the person in there walking back and forth like a caged animal. And this guy was a monster. He was way over 6 foot, big guy. And he was walking back and forth. And I had to stop there and waited till they opened these other doors. So I'm standing there, I'm looking at the guy. He's walking back and forth with his head down. And then when he turned and he started walking toward me, he went like that. And I went. I couldn't look at him in the eye, even behind all that. Like, the guy was scary looking. I can't imagine him being in a parking lot like that. But it was out of weakness that I ended up in jail. So you got to work on your weak links and try to get a handle on that area. Okay, so I want to close this out.